It started the day I dropped by her shop to borrow a wrench and left with something heavier, a silence I still haven't figured out how to set down. Nora ran the small auto repair garage behind her house, a quiet, oil-scented world of clinking metal and low jazz murmuring from a radio older than me. My best friend, Daniel, used to joke that his sister could fix a carburetor faster than she could trust someone. I never understood what he meant until that afternoon. She was bent over a car hood when I walked in, sleeves rolled up, a smear of grease along her wrist. Her hair was pinned messily, half of it coming loose as if it had given up trying to behave. She didn't look up right away, just said, "If you're selling something, turn around. If you're bleeding, come closer." "I'm neither," I said. "I just need a wrench." She straightened then, squinting at me through the fluorescent glare. There was a moment, a brief, electric sort of stillness, when I realized she had the kind of presence that made noise feel unnecessary. "Daniel's friend," she said after a beat. "Eli, right?" "Yeah." She handed me the wrench without a smile. But her fingers brushed mine, a small, unplanned thing. The metal was cold between us, but her hand wasn't. I stayed longer than I meant to. She asked me to hold the light while she worked, and I couldn't think of a reason to say no. The hum of the radio filled the spaces where conversation might have gone. Occasionally, she'd ask for a tool, and I'd hand it over like a student desperate not to fail a test. "You're quieter than your friends," she said at one point, not looking up. "You're quieter than most people I've met," I said back. That made her pause. A faint curve touched her mouth, not quite a smile, more like she was testing how it felt. "That's not always a compliment." "Wasn't meant as one," I said, though I didn't mean it. Her laugh was small and low, barely there, but it felt like I'd started something I wasn't ready to finish. When she finished, she wiped her hands on a rag and finally looked at me properly. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, the kind that seemed to see the thoughts you didn't say aloud. "You should head out," she said. "Daniel's waiting." "Right." But I didn't move. She noticed, of course. Something else. I shook my head, though my mouth opened like I might explain myself. I didn't. The air between us carried too much, the scent of engine oil, the warmth of her arm brushing mine as she moved past, the faint echo of something that shouldn't exist. When I finally left, the sun was dipping behind the garage roof, and the shadows stretched long across the gravel. I told myself I'd only remember the smell of grease and the shape of her laughter. But that night, I caught myself replaying the moment her fingers had touched mine, barely a second, but enough to make me wonder why it felt like she'd left a mark. Sometimes, when I think back, I try to pin it to something specific, a look, a sound, a mistake. But maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was just the way she said my name, quietly, like she was trying to decide if it was dangerous. And I still haven't decided which of us she was protecting, her or me. It had been 2 weeks since that afternoon in her garage. I told myself I'd dropped by again to return the wrench, but the truth was messier than that. Nora didn't look surprised when I showed up. Maybe she'd expected it, or maybe she'd learned long ago not to be surprised by much. She was sitting on the concrete step outside the garage, a thermos beside her, cigarette burning down between her fingers. "You still alive?" she asked, glancing up with that half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Barely. Your wrench is fine, though. Can't say the same for me. Rough week. Something like that." She gestured toward the thermos. "There's coffee, if you don't mind it cold." I sat beside her. The step was hard, and the air smelled like rain that hadn't arrived yet. She didn't move away, didn't move closer either. Just sat there, elbows on her knees, staring at nothing. There was something about the way she held herself, like she'd spent years mastering the art of being unbothered. But I could see the small cracks in it, the dark smudges beneath her eyes, the twitch in her jaw when she thought too long about something. "You look tired," I said before I could stop myself. She gave a dry laugh. "That's what happens when you spend your life fixing other people's messes." I didn't know if she meant the cars or something else. The silence stretched again, comfortable in a way that made me uneasy. I washed her hands. The faint grease lines that never washed out completely, the small cut across her thumb. She flexed her fingers slowly, as if even that movement hurt. I wanted to say something. Ask if she ever let anyone help her. but she looked like the kind of woman who'd turn an offer into a warning. "You shouldn't keep coming by," she said quietly after a while. I turned to her. "Why not?" "Because people talk. Because you're young. Because I'm—" She stopped there, like the word she didn't say was heavier than the rest. "Old," I offered, half smiling. "Smarter," she said, but the edge in her voice wasn't sharp enough to cut through the air between us. We both laughed, soft, awkward, short-lived. Then the laughter faded, and I realized she was looking at me differently now. Not the way you look at a kid, but the way you look at someone you wish you didn't understand so easily. She exhaled, rubbed her hands over her jeans, and stood. "You should go, Eli. The rain's coming." I didn't argue. But as I walked to my car, the first drops began to fall, slow, uneven, like the sky was hesitating too. When I turned back, she was still standing under the awning, arms crossed, watching the rain start to swallow the world around her. For a second, I thought she might wave. She didn't. But the look she gave me said everything else, something quiet, something she'd never let herself say out loud. And that was the moment I knew I'd come back again, even if she never asked me to. It was supposed to be a quick favor, helping her close up the garage after hours before the storm hit. The sky was a strange violet color, clouds bruised and heavy. The air had that metallic taste it gets right before rain, and everything felt like it was waiting for something to give. Nora was quieter than usual. She kept checking her phone between tasks, not nervously, exactly, but like someone half expecting bad news. When it finally buzzed, she froze mid-step, screen lighting up her face. I caught the name before she turned it over. Mark. Her ex-husband. She didn't answer, just slipped the phone into her back pocket and went back to wiping down the counter. But her hand trembled slightly, and she missed a spot. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine." She said it too fast. Then, softer, "Just old noise." The thunder rolled close enough to shake the tools hanging on the wall. I went to check the side door, making sure it was latched. When I turned back, she was standing near the window, her reflection caught in the glass, small, distant, layered against the storm. "You should head home before it gets bad," she said. "I will. Soon." She didn't argue. We ended up waiting the storm out together, sitting on opposite sides of the workbench with a small radio whispering static between us. The power flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Darkness settled, soft, immediate. I pulled out my phone for light, and she laughed quietly. "Guess I'm not the only one afraid of the dark." "I'm not," I said. "Just don't like not seeing what's there." "That's worse," she murmured. "Most things are easier not to see." Something about that hit too close. The rain drummed harder against the roof. I could see her only in pieces, the curve of her shoulder, the faint shine on her hair where my phone light reached. When lightning flashed, it lit up her face just long enough for me to notice she'd been crying. Not dramatically, just quiet streaks she hadn't bothered to wipe away. I wanted to ask what he'd said. I wanted to tell her she didn't deserve to look like that, like someone who'd been made to believe she was difficult to love. Instead, I said, "You shouldn't have to be alone tonight." She looked at me then, a full, unguarded look that made my breath catch. "Eli," she said slowly, warning and plea tangled together. "Don't." "I'm not," I lied. We both knew I was. The air between us felt charged, too full of everything we weren't saying. She took a step toward me, maybe to reach for the flashlight, maybe not. I felt her hand brush against my arm, light as static, and that was enough to undo every carefully built wall inside me. Then her phone buzzed again, slicing through the moment. She pulled back, wiped her face with her sleeve, and exhaled sharply. "Go," she said, "before the road floods." I hesitated. "Eli." Her voice cracked on my name. That was enough to make me turn. I walked out into the rain, every drop hitting harder than it should, and thought about how close we'd come to something we'd both pretend never almost happened. I didn't see her for almost a week after that storm. I told myself I was giving her space, but every time I passed the garage, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. When I finally went in, she was there, sitting on the floor beside an old transmission, grease on her cheek and a look that said she hadn't slept properly in days. "You're back," she said. It wasn't a question. "Didn't think you'd notice." "I noticed things I shouldn't," she said quietly. For a while, we worked without talking. The radio hummed low again, some old song about love that had no business being played in a place that smelled like oil and rain. She handed me tools. I handed them back. Every time our fingers brushed, she flinched, not visibly, but enough that I felt the distance she was fighting to keep. When the job was done, she sat back against the wall, breathing hard. You always show up when things break, she said. Cars. Tools. Me. That's not fair, I said. No, she whispered, it isn't. The silence stretched, thick and uneven. I didn't know whether to leave or stay. She looked tired, not physically, but in that deeper way, where even pretending to be fine costs too much. I sat down beside her, close enough that I could feel the warmth coming off her arm. We can't keep doing this, she said suddenly. I know. Then why are you here? I thought about lying, about saying it was because of Daniel, or the car, or anything else. But the truth had been chewing at me too long. Because I don't like the way the air feels when I'm not. That made her look at me, really look at me, like she was trying to find the boy she could still safely ignore. Her eyes were glassy, not with tears, but something worse, the kind of recognition that breaks you before it saves you. Eli, she said, my name almost a sigh. This isn't right. I'm not saying it is. Then what are we doing? The words landed heavy between us, the way thunder does before it breaks. I didn't answer. I just looked at her, at the way her fingers twisted the rag in her lap, the way her chest rose too quickly, the way her voice had softened like she was afraid of what silence might do next. I keep thinking, she said after a long pause, that maybe I'm just lonely and you're kind enough to notice. That's not it, I said, though part of me wondered if she was right. She shook her head, a faint, broken smile ghosting across her face. You should go before I start believing you. I didn't move. Neither did she. The radio crackled. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Inside, everything else stopped. When I finally stood, she didn't look up. But as I reached the door, her voice came, low, unsteady, barely there. I wish I didn't look forward to you walking in. It was late again when I found myself at her door. Not the garage this time, her house. The light from the kitchen window was soft, yellow, and uninviting in a way that still drew me in. I told myself I just wanted to drop off the socket wrench she'd lent me. Another lie. She opened the door halfway, hair still damp from a shower, wearing an oversized shirt and that same tired look that had settled into her lately. Eli, she said, voice low. You shouldn't, I know. She didn't finish the sentence, and I didn't move. Eventually, she sighed and let the door swing open wider. Fine. Come in before my neighbors start a new story. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and rain-soaked wood. A stack of unopened mail sat on the counter, and the radio, always that old radio, hummed quietly in the corner. She poured me coffee without asking if I wanted any. I took it, mostly to have something to hold. You've been avoiding me, I said. I've been busy. Liar. She laughed once, short, brittle. You get bolder every time. For a while, we sat at the small table, the hum of the fridge filling the spaces where words refused to go. Her phone was face down next to her cup. I noticed the crack on the screen, a thin line slicing through a photo that showed two people I didn't recognize, a man and a young boy. Her hand rested on the child's shoulder. She caught me looking, didn't snatch it away, just stared at the image for a moment before saying quietly, That's my son, and my ex. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. He's 17 now, lives with his father most of the time. Says I make him nervous. Her voice wavered, not breaking, but close. I used to think I was doing him a favor, letting him choose where he felt safest. But now I wonder if I just let him drift too far. She finally met my eyes. There was no anger there, just a raw, exhausted kind of honesty. I think that's why I can't stand you sometimes, she said softly. You remind me of who he used to be before he stopped looking at me like I mattered. That hit deeper than anything else she could have said. I'm not him, I said quietly. I know. She smiled then, not sweetly, but like it hurt. That's the problem. Neither of us spoke after that. The clock ticked loudly, marking seconds that felt longer than they should. When she finally stood, she walked me to the door. The rain had started again, thin and steady. She reached out, like she might touch my sleeve, then stopped just short. "Don't come by for a while," she said. "Please." I nodded, but neither of us moved. Her hand hovered there, suspended in the air between us, trembling slightly. When she pulled it back, she whispered, more to herself than me, "I keep mistaking the past for something new." And before I could answer, the door closed. Weeks passed before I saw her again. Not at the garage, not at her house, just at the small farmer's market that set up near the river every Saturday. She was buying peaches, turning each one in her hand like she was inspecting its worth. I almost walked past. I really tried to. But she saw me before I could disappear into the crowd. For a moment, neither of us waved, smiled, or even blinked. Then she nodded, small and almost shy. The kind of gesture that said, "Come here," without saying it. When I reached her, she looked different. Not younger, not lighter, just real again. "You cut your hair," I said. "Had to. It was getting in the way." "Of what?" "Letting go." She said it so casually that it nearly slipped past me. But her eyes, they held that familiar exhaustion, softer now, like she'd stopped fighting the things she couldn't fix. We walked through the stalls in slow, uneven steps, the kind that fall into rhythm without meaning to. Every few minutes, our shoulders brushed. Neither of us stepped aside. We ended up at the edge of the river, sitting on a low concrete wall where the water reflected the fading sun. She set her bag down, fingers still stained with peach juice. "You stopped coming," she said quietly. "You told me not to. And you listened. I didn't want to make things harder." She smiled faintly. "You didn't. I did that all on my own." The wind caught a loose strand of her hair and pressed it against her cheek. Without thinking, I reached out to move it away. My hand hesitated, too aware of everything that gesture meant. But she didn't pull back. Her breath caught. "Eli." "I know," I said. We stayed like that, my fingers still half-curled against her temple, the world moving somewhere far behind us. "I kept waiting for this to stop meaning something," she said finally. "But it never did." "I don't think it will," I said, though my voice broke halfway through. A long silence followed, not heavy this time, just honest. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against my shoulder. No words, no explanation, just a shared quiet that made everything else unnecessary. I could feel the tremor in her exhale, the small surrender of someone who'd been holding herself together too long. For once, I didn't try to fix it. I just stayed, breathing in the faint scent of peaches and motor oil, the strange mix that was entirely her. When she finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "Whatever this is," she said, "let's not ruin it by naming it." I nodded, eyes closing. "Okay." And in that word, that small, trembling okay, everything between us settled. Not neat, not easy, but real. The sun dipped lower, and neither of us moved. Her hand found mine on the wall, fingers brushing once before resting there. Not gripping, not claiming, just existing beside mine. And that was how it ended. Not in confession, not in goodbye, but in the quiet acceptance that sometimes love doesn't begin or end. It just stays. That it's been almost a year since that afternoon by the river. Nora still runs the garage. She still wipes her hands on that same rag, still hums along to the radio like she's half somewhere else. But something in her shifted, and if I'm honest, so did I. We don't see each other the way we used to. There's no routine, no excuses to stop by, no more borrowed tools or late-night storms. But whenever I do catch a glimpse of her, standing by the garage door, talking to a customer, hair a little shorter now, I feel that same quiet pull. Not the kind that demands anything, just the kind that reminds you it happened, and it mattered. I used to think love was something that needed to be said. Now I think it's something that stays, quietly, in the way you look back at someone and don't regret the ache they left behind. There are small things that haven't changed. I still fix things too carefully. Still think about the way she'd say my name, like she was warning herself, not me. And every time it rains, I catch that same scent of oil and coffee and something unspoken. But here's what I didn't expect. I'm not waiting for her anymore. And somehow, that feels like the purest form of love. Letting someone remain in your story without needing them to return to it. Nora once told me that most people don't break all at once. They just were down until something inside goes quiet. Maybe what happened between us was the opposite. Maybe we didn't break. Maybe we just stopped pretending not to feel what was already there. The last time we talked, it was brief, a chance encounter at the grocery store. She asked how I was doing. I told her I was figuring it out. She smiled, said good. Keep doing that. And that was it. No grand ending. No tears. Just two people standing in an aisle between cereal boxes and coffee beans, carrying a story that didn't need retelling. I walked away lighter. Not because it was over, but because I knew it never really would be. If there's something I've learned, it's this. Love doesn't always ask to be returned. Sometimes, it just wants to be remembered right. So if you've ever had someone like that, someone who walked into your life quietly and changed the way you breathe, even for a moment, don't erase them. You don't have to. Just let them live somewhere inside your story, in that still place between what was said and what was felt. Because that's where the real things stay. Soft pause. And if you're still here, listening, tell me. Have you ever had someone you almost loved and still can't forget?